This is Talk Business and Politics with Roby Brock.
Welcome to today's Talk Business and Politics. I'm Roby Brock, joined by John Brummett of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. We begin our conversation this week on a somber note. A person you and I knew very well has passed away late Sunday evening. Matt DeCample, former KATV reporter here in this studio at one point in time, more famously known as the press spokesman for Governor Mike Beebe, and back when he was AG too.
And an improv comedian also.
He wore a lot of hats there,
so
he did. You dealt with Matt Campbell a lot, as did I. What are your thoughts and memories of Matt DeCample from all of the years that you interacted with him?
I guess the best way to put it is this. Press secretary to the governor is generally considered a difficult, high-stress job. I've dealt with a lot of governors. I've dealt with a lot of press secretaries. And it is it's a vortex. You're speaking for a man or an officer who's supposed to have a position on everything that happens, and you're dealing singularly in his behalf with the entirety of the press corps. And it's beaten down many a good person. Matt DeCample did it with an effortlessness that was remarkable. He handled it with effortless aplomb. He never seemed to get upset, and he had this gift that every relationship he was having, even if it was professional, seemingly, he handled it as if it was naturally personal. You know exactly what I'm talking about, and that was the genius of him. And he was a wonderful guy by acclamation, and an admirable guy by acclamation, even before 3 years ago. Out of the blue, he got a diagnosis of stage 4, aggressive stage 4 cancer. But upon that, he reacted by creating a blog. What was it called?
Matty D versus the Evil C.
Using, being completely open, transparent, and informational about about more than 40 chemotherapy treatments, using humor because he was a hilarious guy, and his good nature throughout that. If you saw him in a period between treatments when he was doing pretty well, he was just the same happy, good-natured guy that he always was. So just a rare, rare talent, and it's just striking that he's gone.
Yeah.
You know,
at age 44,
it's
a
just,
young man.
It's when I heard it last night, it was a hard loss. I will say one mildly political thing, just to demonstrate, in addition to what I've said so far, his skill. During the congressional campaign, Clark Tucker called a news conference to try to highlight the health care issue. Matt was a Democrat and a supporter and friend of Clark Tucker, and Matt came and sort of co-conducted the news conference with Tucker. And Matt just sort of took it over, I thought, with his personal experience. And it was never any semblance of his being used as a prop. This was just him telling his natural story. And he said that in the middle of a series of incredibly expensive cancer treatments, he somehow switched insurance from some kind of group or some kind of COBRA, I don't know. He went into business for himself, and he bought an individual plan on the Obamacare exchange. And he said, you know, never, as I dealt with an agent, to buy an individual plan did it come up that I was in the middle of great costs, because it could not, because of the health care reform law and the pre-existing condition.
Right.
And I thought that was a powerful message for Democrats in the election. It was not a message that was followed through very effectively here or in many places, because politics becomes about more silly things. But it was his willingness to talk openly and with relevance and candor about his situation in a real context. He said if the Republican law had passed and setting up risk pools and giving states the authority to set up these risk pools, then it's a crapshoot as to what your state does, and you might not have that assurance that would relieve your stress in the course of the stress of the disease. Powerful moment. Politics aside, it was a powerful presentation, and that was the kind of thing he was capable of, in addition to his good nature and his good humor. Very articulate about important policy. Yeah. Just a heck of a guy.
I think another outstanding thing about Matt, too, is when he assumed that press secretary role, particularly in the governor's office, came at a time when the media landscape was really transforming. It wasn't just the daily morning newspaper and the evening 5, 6, and 10 news on the 3 networks. It had become bloggers and flip cams and social media and websites and little upstart news companies like Talk Business at the time. And I felt like he treated everybody pretty equally and all that, and got that it was changing at the time.
And did it effortlessly. I mean, you're telling me that, and I'm realizing, yeah, that's true, but you never noticed that he was doing it. As an old line newspaper guy, I might have thought, hey, what about, like, I'm the most important, I'm a newspaper guy. What are you doing with all these upstarts? Well, I didn't even notice it, because whatever he did so effortlessly. And it was just I cannot remember, of all the press secretaries I've dealt with, I don't remember ever having any sort of consternation with him, any moment of conflict. I mean, partly because I mostly wrote nice things about BB, but not always. Not always. So just a heck of a guy.
He was. I am reminded of the Dylan Thomas poem, "Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night," the line where it says, "Rage, rage against the dying of the light." I appreciate how Matt DeCample raged against the light and the dying of the light in his own special way, with his, as you mentioned earlier, his honesty and his wit, his humor, and his courage. It was special.
He fought the evil sea hard, but he didn't fight it somehow angrily or resentfully.
Yep.
Remarkable.
All right, we're going to take a short commercial break and come back and talk some more politics with John Brummett of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette right after this.
Each day, the promise of our nation begins again. Arkansas and America moving forward. I help make that promise a reality. It's not for everyone, but people everywhere depend on us.
Oh, I love you too, sweetie.
Trucking delivers, or everything stops. And that's what drives me.
I did.
You'll find us at the end of a lot of long country roads, covering over 60% of the great state of Arkansas. Our 17 electric distribution cooperatives are working day and night to provide reliable, affordable power to over 500,000 homes, farms, and businesses, just like yours. The Electric Cooperatives of Arkansas, your local energy partners.
Welcome back to Talk Business and Politics, joined by John Brummett of the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. Let's turn our attention to some national politics first. This last weekend, we saw a more than 2-hour speech by President Donald Trump to CPAC, the conservative group there. What did we witness in that 2-hour plus speech? I've read a lot of interpretations and listened to a lot of talking heads. I still can't make full sense of it.
Robbie, don't tee it up for me like that, because you've got a lot of Trump-supporting viewers, and they're not going to be pleased with what I'm going to say. What we witnessed was madness. We witnessed the madness of a would-be despot. It was like some tin-horn would-be dictator, just wanting the world to be all his way, and talking nonsensically, rambling, with self-serving cant for actually 2 hours and 2 minutes. Is how long he went with that nonsense, using profanity, mocking his critics. And your question may go more to what does this mean about what's his state, what's in his mind. And there's a big dispute. Is this just Trump? He had the worst of all the weeks of his presidency. This was probably the worst. I mean, Cohen, his fixer,
There's been some bad ones, John.
The Korean thing fell through. The Congress, the House overrode him or didn't override him, but said he couldn't use the money for the wall in the way with past legislation. And something else happened. All of it really, really bad. It may have just been his ego was so activated, his megalomania was so activated by what happened. Some people are wondering, does he know something that Mueller's getting ready to say that we don't know? And
I sense that every time we see one of these kind of, I call them meltdowns, because this isn't the first time, it's the longest time that he's done it, but we've seen these types of rambling events before. They tend to precede some big event, an indictment, charge, something coming that he...
I've heard that speculation. That's why I mentioned it. It's either just things are going horribly and he's striking out uncommonly because things are even worse than usual, or as president, he probably has some people telling him what they think may be coming along. And we do have a Mueller report that's due, I think, sort of any day. And there's a
Could not.
Could not. And there's a conventional wisdom that they're not going to quite reach anything that locks down conspiracy or obstruction of justice. But that's just a conventional wisdom, and sometimes those are wrong. And we'll have to see what it says. It's possible that he knows something. Even so, this was disconcerting to many Americans. I would say 9 to 60% of Americans to see their president behaving in that way. Either it was disconcerting or we're so broadly numbed to what has happened that it wasn't as disconcerting as you might think it ought to be, because he was not in fully control of himself. That was not adult restraint that he was showing in that.
Well, there's been some talk too that when you saw the reaction from the crowd there, when you listen to the rhetoric that's out there, when you just watch the tea leaves kind of forming, that we are headed for some sort of civil war. People made the prognostication that he would not leave office without some sort of fight or normal transition of power if that happens, whether it's by defeat or impeachment or something else. But I don't get the sense that we're about to enter a civil war. It seems over the top to me to suggest that.
Yeah. If there's anything left over the top, it's that suggestion. I don't think so, and I don't even want to harbor the thought. I do, however, and I've long contended, if you believe this man should be removed from office, if your belief about what's best for America is that we not have this style of leader or this personality as leader, the greatest, best solution is to proceed to an election and defeat him with somebody who demonstrates better temperament and also good ideas and policies. That's the way it ought to be. If there is a significant move to impeach and remove, it fuels further. I mean, because Trump is all about resentment. The Trump base is 35–38% who like him in spite of everything he does because of what he represents. I think it's Chris Cuomo on CNN, rare that I would cite a cable news host, but he did a little analysis and said Trump is not being considered by his base as a man. He's metaphor. He's metaphor for what they don't like about the country. And every time you try to tell them he has lied or he has done something wrong, they say, well, all politicians are, but at least he's speaking my language. So it's not that they embrace the man, they embrace the metaphor. And from that, civil unrest can arise potentially, but we're not to that point, and we shouldn't even ponder that at the present time.
Right. You got a column coming up on Tuesday, I believe, that discusses a recent conversation. Mayor Frank Scott, Governor Asa Hutchinson, some others were at a forum, I think, on Friday. Give us a little preview without spoiling the column, of course.
Okay, Emmanuel Baptist Church brought in a young sort of hip-hop Southern Baptist preacher who has some very progressive ideas on race and blending principles of religious faith and racial advancement. And in concert with his appearance, they invited the governor and the mayor to attend. The mayor caught a lot of heat locally because Little Rock is an urban place with a lot of with a strong and politically active gay community, and Horton, of course, as a Southern Baptist, holds the position that
this is one of the speakers, Horton.
Horton, the hip-hop preacher, that gayness is sinful and an abomination and all of that. They had a decent discussion for an hour. It was pretty good, and Scott said all the right things about inclusion. But here's what I ended up finding most interesting. At the end, Asa Hutchinson, who seemed sort of uncomfortable, he said at one point, it's easy for you all to talk about the theological principle. The political application becomes harder to talk about. But he turned at one point and said, there's the Democratic leader, minority leader of the state House, Charles Blake, and he has introduced a bill that I commend him for his inviting us to have an important conversation. To me, this was an interesting moment because Governor Hutchinson's party, represented by on the House State Agencies Committee, had rebuffed this bill to redefine the Confederate star on the state flag to no longer have that represent or pay or commemorate the Confederacy. And Asa hadn't taken a position on it, and he didn't take a position on it there. But he did find it necessary, did not find it necessary, he found it worthwhile to bring it up and to praise the conversation. And I went, of course, I hustle right down front, and I say, what, are you thinking about this bill? And he said, I'm always thinking about bills. And I said, no, what are you thinking about this one particularly? And he said, I'm thinking I need to have more conversations about it.
Well, you remember he expressed regret over not involving himself in the separation of the Martin Luther King, Robert E. Lee holiday, and the next session rolled around and he did
I think
publicly do that.
He either was just condescending to Blake and getting through the moment by saying something he thought nice, but he did have a conversation with Blake, who was there after. Or this signals that Asa, maybe not this week, maybe not next week, but he's a very patient man. I think this signals that we might see this legislation, I hate to say this because I don't know it, but I think I could see him moving to favor that position over time. Yep. And the fact that he wanted to talk about it at all may have signaled that.
All right. He's John Brummett with the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette. As the late Matt DeCample always said, Brummett's going to Brummett.
Used Brummett as a verb, and he honored me by doing so. I cherish that.
Good to be with you as always.
Thank you.
All right. That's all for today's program. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Roby Brock. We'll see you next time.